Hello, I'm Desirée Prideaux. I'm delighted to be part of this year's International Agatha Christie Festival and to have this opportunity to talk with you about my book, Sleuthing Miss Marple. Settling into a Christie murder mystery always puts me in a state of happy mental alert, and I regard her stories as a form of readerly sport. They invite us into the crime fiction game with the promise to abide by the rules of fair play, and we read on in the certain knowledge that the stories will try to trick us at every turn and that the rules will be pushed to breaking point. When I wrote this book, I wanted to convey that sense of fun and intellectual challenge, so I decided to explore the methods that Christie uses to ambush readers and to structure my investigation along the lines of a classic detective novel. To achieve the aim of exploring Christie's methods, I focused on the Marple mysteries and amassed a body of critical evidence drawn from the early short stories and the 12 novels. I'd always enjoyed the Marple books, but when I read them from a research perspective, I was struck by three aspects that set them apart from other clue puzzles. The first is the sustained tone of irony in women and men characters, which invites consideration of their portrayal and narrative placement. The second is Christie's quite remarkable experimentation with genre. It's widely acknowledged that her engagements with the clue puzzle pushed that genre to its limits. However, Christie's incursions into other genres within her crime fictions are rarely examined. The third is the variety of underhanded ways that Christie devised to grant agency to the spinster sleuth and other female characters. For these reasons, Sleuthing Miss Marple focuses specifically on the areas of gender, genre, and agency in the Marple mysteries. To achieve my objective of mirroring the playful analytical style of detective fiction, I began my investigation at the scene of the crime by placing Agatha Christie and the clue puzzle in historical context. My exploration of Christie's life and social influences, her wartime work, her marriage and disappearance, provides critical background information. It also casts early light on the methods, the motives, and, in a sense, the alibis that underpin her work. From there, I pursued several new lines of inquiry. I examined Christie's engagements with the rules of the genre in the short stories which make up the book The 13 Problems. I treat these inceptive Marple stories as a cold case and devise new methods of analysing them. I explore Christie's engagements with the spinster stereotype and detective archetype in Marple's portrayal and analyse the sleights of hand that Christie conceals behind comic and gothic moments in the Marple mysteries. Each chapter uses evidence to advance new theories about Christie's modus operandi, and in classic detective fashion, the findings from each chapter build towards a resolution that reveals the mysteries in a new light. In the early stages of my investigation, I expected that everything would be answered by close analysis of this character. But she proved elusive. Miss Jane Marple first appeared in a short story in issue 350 of the Royal Magazine in December 1927. There, readers encounter a sedate, rather Victorian spinster with an unbeatable talent for solving crimes. That story later became the first mystery of the 13 Problems. In the first novel, The Murder at the Vicarage, Christie takes Marple out of the parlour and locates her in the hustle and bustle of village life. The Marple of the novels becomes a more active and more modern character. In The Body in the Library, Christie gives a quick sketch that catches the enduring likeness of her spinster sleuth.
Downstairs in the lounge, by the third pillar from the left, there sits an old lady with a sweet, placid, spinsterish face, and a mind that has plumbed the depths of human iniquity and taken it as all in a day's work. Her name's Miss Marple, and where crime is concerned, she's the goods.
The idea of a sweet, unassuming old lady who is the goods where crime is concerned has sustained readers for nearly a century. However, it does invite the question, how did Christie make it possible for a quietly spoken elderly spinster to get away with solving murder? To answer this, I examined the character traits, narrative strategies, and literary devices that Christie used in Marple's portrayal. With close reference to the texts, I ascertained that Christie exploits the mundane and the mystical aspects of the spinster stereotype in a number of devious ways. As a mundane spinster, Marple sleuths from a position of genteel poverty, sedate old age, and social marginality. Often her appearance alone provides access to scenes of crime. For example, in the 450 from Paddington, Marple comes to tea as the old aunt of her recent acquaintance and undercover assistant, Lucy Islesborough. Upon meeting the family, Marple demonstrates her skills as an accomplished liar by launching full steam ahead into completely fabricated reminiscences of Lucy's childhood. Marple also turns restrictive ideas about old age to her advantage. For example, while undercover at Bertram's hotel, she feigns dithery absent-mindedness. First, Marple forgets her gloves and must therefore go back past the people that she is observing in order to retrieve them. Next, she drops her handbag near their table, which came open and spilled various oddments, affording her another opportunity to listen in on their conversation. When a well-meaning waitress comes to her aid, Marple is forced to show a great shakiness and drop coins and keys a second time in order to continue eavesdropping. At other times, Marple's supposed delicate health allows her to convalesce conveniently close to murder scenes. Marple also exploits perceptions that cast her as dithery, fluffy, or frail. For example, in They Do It With Mirrors, Alex Restorick wonders at the presence of a stranger in the midst of a family murder.
He looked as though he would like her explained, but nobody explained her, and Miss Marple continued to look an old, fluffy, and sweetly bewildered old lady.
Marple cultivates underestimations and uses them as part of her spinsterly camouflage. I also found that seemingly harmless feminine pastimes such as shopping, knitting, and taking tea are elevated to precision instruments of Marple's deductive method. In addition to making use of mundane qualities, Christie also activates the mystical potential of the spinster. In Marple, Christie combines the two faces of the spinster stereotype, the reassuring image of the sweet old lady and the menacing aspects of the guileful crone. One example of the more sinister aspects of the Marple character may be seen in her habit of knitting. This quiet occupation is not only part of her spinsterly camouflage, but it also endows Marple with the supernatural powers associated with the crone. I identify moments in which characters are held spellbound by the rhythmic click of Marple's knitting needles. Under their mesmerising influence, characters reveal their deepest thoughts to the spinster sleuth. This provides Marple with previously hidden evidence and allows her to take control of the investigation. My analysis also uncovered an overlooked aspect of Marple's portrayal. Christie aligns the spinster sleuth with ideals and characteristics that are usually associated with masculine heroes and blends these qualities with feminine traits. This is achieved by descriptions that evoke the heroic archetype, but which are tempered by spinsterly displays of reticence. I describe this subtle method of characterization as the feminine heroic and cite several instances in which heroic attributes exist alongside Marple's modest demurals and pink-cheeked fluster. When I turned my attention to secondary characters, the first thing of note was the range and scope of active women. Christie's women are highly visible and relevant to the story in ways beyond that of the usual romantic interest or murder victim. They often occupy pivotal roles such as sleuths, assistants, suspects, and even murderers. For example, Nemesis is a novel of 25 characters, of which 14 are women and 11 are men. Of the 8 major characters, 7 are women. It's unusual in crime fiction to have such a preponderance of female characters, and Nemesis is particularly unusual in that the sleuth, main suspects, murderer, and murder victim are all women. Furthermore, only the victim is young and beautiful. It's also interesting that Christie's fondness for strong women extends to the role of murderer, and this is evident from the earliest stories. In the short stories that make up the 13 problems, there are 10 murders. 5 are carried out by women, 4 by men, and 1 by a man and woman acting together. This even-handed apportioning of the villain's role is a discernible feature throughout Christie's crime fiction, as is the oft-used ploy of the murderous couple. This establishes that, in Christie's crime fiction, murder is an equal opportunity pursuit. My analysis of the portrayal and positioning of women and men characters reveals that Christie turns the tables on narrative expectations by inverting gender representation and genre conventions. With regard to secondary characters, I observed that Christie comically subverts narrative expectations in her depictions of stock characters such as the femme fatale and the dotty old witness. I also found that Christie redefines the heroic ideal in order to expand feminine roles, such as the plucky love interest and the awkward ingenue. In these characters, Christie reiterates but modifies the tactic of the feminine heroic that I discerned in the Marple character. I describe these characters as the heroic women of the Marple mysteries and demonstrate that their association with qualities such as courage, intelligence, and personal integrity allows them purpose and action in the stories beyond that of mere romance. My research also identified a group of male characters that stand in ironic counterpoint to Christie's heroic women. Throughout the Marple stories, male characters such as Sir Henry Clithering, Raymond West, Inspector Craddock, the Vicar of St Mary Mead, and others utter variations of the phrase, "Miss Marple, you take my breath away." 2 examples which occur within a page of each other are seen in the early short story, A Christmas Tragedy. Marple tells her listeners that after observing fellow guests, Mr. and Mrs. Sanders, she had no doubt that here was a nice, contented, happy little married woman shortly going to be murdered. Sir Henry interjects,
"My dear lady, you take my breath away."
Marple continues her story, explaining that she felt compelled to force the would-be murderer's hand and then trap him in the attempt. At this point, Dr. Lloyd repeats the phrase,
"You take my breath away."
Given this repeated motif, I conceptualize these characters as the breathless men of Christie's crime fiction. The moving finger provides an example of the narrative strategies that I associate with Christie's heroic women and breathless men. Jerry Burton is a temporary invalid who has relocated to the country to repair his health. He settles into his rustic home and quickly encounters a mystery. Were this character to follow a predictable narrative pathway, readers may reasonably expect him to fall into step with the detective, aid in the investigation, and thereby regain his health and confidence. Megan Hunter is an attractive young resident of the village. She enters the story by falling off of her bicycle and landing at Jerry's feet. In this act, she also falls into the story as the ingenue character of romantic comedy. Again, the conventional narrative pathway would have Megan continue to fall for Jerry, with marriage as the only significant development for her character. But that is not what happens. In Christie's iteration, the narrative positions are reversed. Jerry does try to involve himself in the investigation, but it proves too much for his delicate health. As he tries and fails to solve the mystery, he suffers from dreams, hallucinations, and brainstorms that leave him shaken and uncertain. He bumbles unhelpfully into the official police investigation and has a nightmare vision that further disorients him. In this manner, Jerry falls victim to the Gothic sublime, and he spends the latter part of the story wandering through the background like a lost wraith. This functions in a number of significant ways. Jerry's nightmare debilitates him, but it provides a clue that puts Marple on the right track. His lapses into emotional confusion, increasing agitation, and inability to reason position him at a remove from the principal investigation. Further, these narrative devices relegate Jerry to the romantic subplot of the story. In contrast, Marple recruits Megan to help trap a murderer, and she becomes more than just Jerry's love interest. There's a moment in the text that makes the positions of the characters very clear. Jerry has been frantically searching for Megan, and he sees her in conversation with Marple. He hurries over to speak with Megan, but she turns her back on him and walks away. Marple blocks his path to prevent him from following, saying,
"No, don't go after Megan now. It wouldn't be wise." At Jerry's objection, Marple tells him, "That girl has courage, a very high order of courage. Don't try and see her now. I do know what I'm talking about. She must keep her courage intact." At this point, Marple is bringing Megan into a more active and courageous role and into a different narrative position.
Later, Jerry watches from a hidden vantage point as Megan confronts the murderer. Just as he decides to break cover and go to her aid, he is restrained by Superintendent Nash, who whispers,
"Quiet, Burton, for God's sake!"
Thus, Jerry is kept on the sidelines while Megan and the police bring Marple's plan to catch the murderer into effect. In The Moving Finger, it is the love interest that falls into step with the detective, and Christie has inverted the usual narrative expectation. Jerry becomes a breathless spectator, and Megan is no longer the awkward girl that began the story. She is now one of Christie's heroic women. With recourse to the texts, I demonstrate that it's a consistent feature of the Marple mysteries that when male characters encounter comic and Gothic literary devices, they are relegated to the margins of the stories. While Christie's male characters are catching their breath or recovering from nightmare visions, her female characters capably assist Marple in solving crimes.
At the end of a classic murder mystery, the detective brings the precipitating events, clues, and other information together in such a way that the only possible solution suddenly becomes clear. In the spirit of the clue puzzle and Christie's style, my book also closes on a denouement. I retrace the steps of my investigation, revisit the central findings, and consider the evidence that has accrued. I demonstrate that Christie plays the clue puzzle game at the level of gender, genre, and agency. I then bring the central findings from each chapter together to reveal the Marple stories and Christie in a new light. Taking a lesson from Christie, I won't give away the ending.